Good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, and I'm Kerry Lambert. I welcome you to an evening of solutions for a new Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect the prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and self-determination by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship within or without Canada. If you can, please share this webinar. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble, as well as after this live, we're also on other video and audio sites like Apple, Spotify, BitChute, and Vimeo under the Alberta Prosperity Project, as well as under the Chris and Kerry Show. And you can find out more by going to the Alberta Prosperity Project website, and that is at albertaprosperityproject.com. Of course, we need donations in order to keep our this whole thing going. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, or you can make a donation again on the website. And lots of information on this website. Every day, or it seems like every day, there's something else going on. We have a whole bunch of new news to talk about. We also are doing a new social media, and I'm just going to jump over to our X account here. And you can take a look. So we're on X, we're on Twitter, or they are the same thing. Instagram and Facebook, and we're doing the this series here. APP is not a separatist movement. We aim to educate and empower Albertans to secure their prosperity and sovereignty within, whether Alberta's future lies within or without Canada. It's about control over our destiny. Please let us know what you think of this this series, if you like, and if you're sharing, and what you're doing with that, if it's getting conversations with your neighbors or your friends, that sort of thing, because that's really what this is all about. We need we need people to get involved and to get the word out. And if you do want to make some comments, by all means, this is a live webinar. You can always make comments, but you can also send us an email at contact@albertaprosperityproject.com or Alberta Prosperity. I can't read tonight. It looks so dark in here. I've got a new webcam, so it's adjusting, and it really looks dark. So you can send us an email off at that. Tonight's episode is called Your Voice in Envisioning Alberta's Future. Upon the release last week of the UCP governance and policy resolutions to be voted on at the UCP AGM on November 1st and 2nd, there's been a lot of talk online about how people can push the Alberta Prosperity Project's values forward in Alberta. And while we're going to be discussing that one tonight and going through the policies one by one, if we can, and of course, we have two former CEOs of Alberta Prosperity Project to discuss these with. Two big brains. Dr. Dennis Modry is also the founder of APP, and Chris Scott, who is the dynamic speaker and my compadre from the Whistle Stop Cafe. I just can't speak tonight. I have no idea what's going on. But with that, if you could share. And again, this is a live webinar, so if you can't make comments and ask questions, please put 3 question marks before your question so I can be flagged, and I will try to answer it if I can try and read it. And with that, I'm going to bring on Dennis and Chris. Hello, good evening, gentlemen. See, I can't even speak right now.
Good evening, Kerry.
Good evening.
How's everybody doing?
Pretty excellent.
Good, excellent. And you know what? I've totally screwed things up here already. I had a tab open with the resolutions. There we are. Now I've got it open. Wow. I'm just going to sit back and you guys can just talk.
Well, I don't have anything to say, which is weird.
No, what? You always have something to
say. I can make this really, really simple.
Yes.
And that is that there were, 20 governance resolutions that the UCP Board of Directors approved.
That's right.
Along with, how many? 35, was it?
37?
37?
There are 35. 35.
So, yeah. Policy resolutions, right. So there were many more that were submitted. I think there were some 300 policy resolution recommendations. Wow. And about 100 governance resolution recommendations. And although a number of good ones didn't get through, a lot of really good ones did get through, both on the governance side and on the policy side. And in a very simplistic fashion, from from my point of view, and I think from the point of view of APP, but we could discuss these two things. Of the governance resolutions, in my opinion, they're all okay except number 10 and 14, which we could talk about. And all of the policy resolutions are very reasonable.
Yes.
And they advance the agenda, if you will, of the proposed Alberta Bill of Rights, Freedoms, and Responsibilities. And so that's a good thing. Yeah. So in a very simplistic fashion, if you're a listener going to the AGM and you're voting, I don't want you necessarily to trust me. You're welcome to read all the resolutions. But I think all but governance resolution 10 and 14, I find a bit problematic. But all of the rest of the governance resolutions seem good, and similarly, all of the policy resolutions seem reasonable as well. So that kind of makes it simple for the listener if they don't want to be troubled with going through everything. On the other side of the coin, it's worthwhile doing it.
Oh, it's absolutely worthwhile going through it. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm just going to stop you just for a brief what happened with last week. So last week we were, and I was told anyways, that we would have these by the Tuesday, and that we were able to do this show last Wednesday. And of course that didn't happen. We got the notification, really it was Tuesday, but we made the call on Wednesday to basically put this off for another week because they were not going to be made public until Friday. So that's basically what ended up happening. It was live on the unitedconservative.ca site as of last Friday. I just put the link in all the comment section. So if somebody wants to download it and follow along, that's great. Otherwise, I'll still have it up on the screen and we can go through some of these. So basically, Dennis, maybe a quick synopsis on what is the difference between the governance and policies, and what is that process, just for people that don't know or have never been to an AGM and how all this works?
Sure. The governance resolutions primarily pertain to the way in which the party and the government operates. Yeah. The policy resolutions, on the other side of the coin, have to do with I guess you could say
how the government works, or the legislation.
Well, it's what they're doing on a day-to-day basis that affects
what they believe in.
The governance resolutions don't necessarily affect our lives directly, but the
That's
policy resolutions do.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
Yeah.
And so you often hear of the term policy wonk, somebody who's big into the policy issues. And as you know, we did if you go to the website, if you go to our website, you'll see what we have for recommendations regarding recommendations of how a sovereign Alberta would function. Mm-hmm. And to a significant extent, policy resolutions that were passed at last year's AGM and at this year's AGM align with what we've been proposing for the last few years. Yeah. So in a very real way, the government, if I would say it differently, the UCP party has taken up many of the things that we have been recommending already. Mm-hmm. And which is one of the reasons why a very powerful resolution, in my opinion, we held back on submitting, because so many of the things that likely were to get on the docket for this year's vote would make it a little bit unnecessary at this particular. Fundamentally, it was an accountability resolution to make the members, to make the MLAs and the premier accountable to the members, and it's never been done.
That was the open vote policy governance resolution.
Well, it's a little different. I mean, I can, at some point in this discussion, I can bring it up to show you what we were thinking of. This is something I'd gone over with Ray Strom, who's is the VP of Policy and Governance for the UCP Board of Directors, mm-hmm. and Leighton Gray. The three of us worked on this, and It probably isn't perfect, but it certainly would hold MLAs accountable to the members. And why I say that is relevant because, we constantly beat on MLAs and the premier that if they want to appease the left, they're going to lose the right and they're going to lose the vote.
That's true.
Of the right, because people become jaded and they say, well, my vote doesn't matter and I'm not going to get involved. But if the government is implementing policies that are conservative in nature and not Marxist or Stalinist or communistic in nature, then they're going to find that their voter base will increase substantively, as opposed to their voter base leaving the province or not voting at all.
And likewise,
even with too much further. Sorry, Kerry. I just want to really make sure people understand the policy and governance thing. So if you have to think of it in a different way, I'll try and put it into layman's terms. So when we're talking about governance, that means how we're going to go about business and get to the destination we want to get to. And the policies encapsulate some of the destinations that we want to reach. For example, affirming Albertans' rights, right? That's one of the policy resolutions, as far as I recall, was that the United Conservative Party of Alberta believes that the net zero targets are ridiculous, CO2 is important, and we shouldn't be pursuing net zero policy. Okay, so that's something we believe in. And the governance.
I hate to correct anybody, but the governance resolutions pertain to the functioning of the party in government.
Yes,
it's their functioning. It's how they control themselves.
Right.
Okay? And that's different because what you correctly pointed out is the policies are what the members want to see the government implement that affects their lives. That's the difference. So governance pertains just to bylaws and the party. Policy relates to what affects us.
Right. So the how we're doing things and the what we want to accomplish.
Right. Right. I agree with that.
And again, the way that these are presented at the AGM is because, again, going back, we talked about 300 of these were filtered down through the board and and all the other. Was there an actual board? Is that the way it works, Dennis? They go through the actual UCP provincial board to whittle down from the 300 down to 50.
Right. And so, for example, Ray Strom, being the VP of Policy and Governance for the Board of Directors, oversees with a committee all of these resolutions that are proposed, both governance resolutions and policy resolutions. And it's a monumental task because, but it's a good thing because when constituency association members and boards and presidents are involved in the process, they're coming up with ideas to not only improve how the party operates, but also to improve how the government operates in terms of how they will govern the public. It really was a monumental task. It probably gets greater every year. Primarily because more and more people come up with good ideas, but not all of the ideas, get to the floor for a vote at the AGM.
So again, it's a grassroots. It comes through the constituency association that's presented to the board, and then they go through a certain number of these to say, yes, these are the ones we're going to be voting for at the AGM.
Yeah.
And then basically what ends up happening is we have these explained to us at the AGM. They go through them one by one, which is kind of what we're going to be going through them. But they really only have about 30 seconds or so to explain the reason why they're doing it because there's so many of them and they don't want to take up so much time. So some of these will gloss over really quick and others may end up being a 2-hour conversation. No, they won't be a 2-hour conversation. But they certainly could be because there's a lot of thought being put into them. So when we're actually looking at these, and actually what I'm going to do is I might as well throw them up on the screen right now. When we're actually going through these, you will see that they are presented by a constituency association, and then what kind of type it is and the area, and then there's always the resolution or the policy, and things may change. So in this particular case, with all the governance, they're usually striking things, adding things to their governance, the actual book that they conduct themselves on. I guess that's another way you can look at it too. So they're making these changes so that if they go through meetings and they decide, okay, well, what are the actual steps in order to do an election at the CA level? What are the these different things? These are in this book. They're in the governance, and that's exactly what they're trying to change. So I'm not sure if we really need to go through a lot of these, unless there's one or two, like you said, number 10 or number
14.
14. So let's scroll down to that. So again, they'll have what the changes are, what the addition is, and then what the rationale is, and we'll probably just gloss over a few of these anyways. So number 10 right here is from Sherwood Park, and the resolution is: any lobbyist who is included in the Alberta Lobbyist Registry administered by the Office of the Ethics Commissioner shall not be permitted to hold any position on a CA board in Alberta. And again, the rationale is it's clearly a conflict of interest. Lobbyists are currently on CA boards and have the ability to influence the representative MLA simply for their own personal gain. So to me, that sounds totally legit. I'm all for it, but I know Dennis has a rationale behind it. So,
well, I do. I have a reservation. I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter who is on a constituency association board. In a way, when we're trying to convince somebody else, or we're trying to convince an MLA in that representing that riding, we're lobbying that particular person about a policy or whatever. But it doesn't mean to say that we're a registered lobbyist.
yes.
If you're a registered lobbyist, okay, this is what's important to understand. If you're a registered lobbyist, and that's what this should be addressing, and it says there under 7.9, if you're included in the Alberta Lobbyist Registry, then whatever you're lobbying for should be, you should recuse yourself in any activity with respect to being involved with the CA board or with the CA board. And if you, as long as you've recused yourself and you're up front, then you can talk about a whole bunch of other things. Why I'm saying I'm not a registered lobbyist, and I'm not trying to protect registered lobbyists, but there's a lot of very bright people who are registered lobbyists for the, say, the oil and gas industry, or for forestry, or for healthcare, or whatever, but they're registered for that. And I don't see a reason why they should be precluded from being on a constituency association board of directors, as long as they are not voting for some resolution that relates to their assigned lobbyist position. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you're precluding some very good people from being on boards because they might be a registered lobbyist. But the simple way to solve that, like I say, is those people should be recused automatically from voting on anything pertaining to what they're lobbying about. So that's why I'm opposed to it, because you're getting rid of some very good people. And I don't know who these people are, but I'm assuming, since the resolution says there are people who have the ability to influence representative MLA simply for their own personal gain, I don't necessarily buy that.
And that's also assuming that only registered lobbyists would be doing anything for their own personal gain. Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think having gone through the last couple of years, few years anyways, of the AGM, there are a lot of these policies that make it to the floor, and then when they're actually spoken about, and you hear both sides, because that's the way it works, is you hear the pro and then a con. I think they do 2 each. And by the time they look at it, they go, well, maybe the wording isn't right. So maybe let's just hold off on this one until next year. That could end up happen here because, again,
there's a couple that did.
Are you a registered lobbyist? I mean, honestly, like in theory, we're all lobbyists, aren't we? We're all trying to influence something for our own gain or for the gain of the province. And so we have these conversations to try and influence change. And now that I've read that again with the way Dennis says it, yeah, I could say, well, maybe it's just, is it all lobbyists or is there some other language that we
Well, see, let's think of another way to say it. It could be something like any lobbyist who is included in the Alberta Lobbyist Registry administered by the Office of the Ethics Commissioner shall not be permitted to influence or vote on any resolution pertaining to their professional position as a lobbyist.
That makes more sense, right? So if you're
something like
if you're in oil and gas, and you could vote on teaching or something like that, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to talk about maybe exploration within your constituency, right?
I like what Stone Lee says there. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. Yeah, very true. Okay. Good. And then you had one more. It was number 14?
Number 14. Yeah, number 14.
All right. So for Modry, East, general dispute resolution process. So it's the ethics commissioner, and this is about actually having an ethics commissioner. And again, this would all be added into there. And the rationale is the UCP is committed to a top-down transparency through its entire membership. By creating the position of an ethics commissioner, the party is committing to openness in our ethics and complaint process. The theory is that a retired judge will be bound by the professional ethics to maintain impartiality.
Sorry.
Chris knows well about that. Candidature shall be by application. The vetting process and interviews shall be completed by the party board. The ability to maintain impartiality on all issues shall be the determining factor in this contract position. So they're looking at actually creating the role of an ethics commissioner.
So
this one, oh, go ahead, Dennis. I'll try.
I was going to say, so I have a couple of reasons to recommend that this be turned down. Just say, keep it right there.
Okay.
One of them has to do with the fact that ask yourself the question, do we have enough bureaucracy already? All right. This creates another level of bureaucracy. There already is an ethics commissioner, for one thing. This is another ethics commissioner, and it's based on for the party. It's based on a theory, okay? And if you subscribe to the theory that a retired judge will be bound by the professional ethics to maintain impartiality, well, then by all means, if you believe that, then support this resolution.
Yeah.
And the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, for that ethics commissioner and his entourage of people to be investigating and addressing some complaint within the party. So personally, I just think it's another make work project. It's unnecessary. And people who are dealt with, people within there is a code of ethics already. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's pretty straightforward what the code of ethics is. And if you breach the code of ethics, then, you're out, but there is a process to deal with it. This is just instituting another layer of bureaucracy that I think is unnecessary. That's why I oppose it. And I oppose anything that's going to be adding money, or cost to our system.
I agree.
So that's why I oppose this. I don't know.
Chris,
yeah, so I don't have an issue with the idea of having an ethics commissioner. However, as far as I'm aware, the way these things are dealt with right now is these concerns go through the board, right? And the first word that I didn't really like on this resolution was appointed. I don't believe that we should be appointing somebody to be an ethics commissioner. If we're going to do that, the members should be voting on it at an AGM, because the authority of the party resides in the party members.
Yeah.
That's the way the United Conservative Party is. That's the way they operate. The authority is with the members. So any questions of ethics, to me, should be a board, like a robust debate within the board, brought to the members, and then that's where it should go. The idea is great, but I just don't like some of the words. And like Dennis said, I think, we are adding another layer that we maybe don't particularly need. And I would be happy to entertain some, if people have comments as to specific instances where we would need an ethics commissioner, I'm all ears, but I'm unaware of anything that the membership or the board hasn't been able to handle so far.
No, I agree. At least to some extent, like even with Jennifer Johnson. I mean, and again, that's kind of a different idea, but whether it would go through an ethics commissioner or if it just goes through the board, then, they at least have some process of getting things done and dealt with.
That's a good example. And I'll speak to that briefly. Mm-hmm. In that case, what happened to Jennifer Johnson was it had nothing to do with ethics. It had everything to do with politics and optics.
Yes, that's true.
If you look at that from an ethical perspective, Jennifer Johnson didn't actually do the things that she was accused of doing. And had people been less interested in political optics and more interested in ethics and truth, there would have been pushback, and what happened to her would have never happened if conservatives had stood behind conservatives. But instead, that was abandoned, and it was just, we're just going to sweep this under the rug and let time do its thing.
Yeah.
That's politics. It's a nasty beast, and I don't agree with it. But, that kind of thing, that's something that the members are going to have to bring up. And as a matter of fact, Dennis, if I'm correct, there is something like that in one of the policy resolutions in this year that's presented at this year's AGM. So it is working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Kerry, just bring up that document again, just for a second.
The
policy. Do
you want to go back to that again?
Yeah. Just go. I don't know. Go to number 15. Just for a minute.
15.
Or just stop anywhere. Anywhere.
Okay. Anyway, sure.
So I just want to emphasize, this is a governance resolution. You see how it's confined to rules governing constituency association? Go to the next one. This has to do with rules, another rule governing constituency association. And if you just keep going through, this is standing committee list. Okay, so this is all these governance resolutions pertain to the party and the bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay, then we get to what Chris and I like to get into, and that is, what do we want to see happen for us?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. What do we want to see that's going to improve the lives of Albertans? And this is where the policies come in, which is why policies are so important. Yeah. But as we understand, and I think some of the members may have heard me say this before, but it's worth repeating, is that traditionally the member-approved governance and policy resolutions at an AGM, after the AGM, what's been approved in a vote goes into a member-approved policy and governance resolution document, and then it generally sits on the shelf. There's no compulsion for the MLAs or the premier to implement any of those policies. Mm-hmm. And I make the point, as strongly as I can, that's to their peril. That's to the peril of conservative governments who keep shifting to the left to try and appease the left. Mm-hmm. And the left is never going to vote for them. If the left is never going to vote for them, then why should the MLAs and the premier be reticent to implement conservative policy? And they shouldn't be. It reminds me, Maggie Thatcher used to make decisions, and then she'd convince her caucus to support her. You know, she didn't make decisions based on polling. She didn't make decisions based on the opposition beating her door down, and you know, giving hundreds of phone calls, thousands of phone calls, to try and get her to change her mind on something. She made a decision and convinced
her own values, and
that's why she was the Iron Lady. You know, she based her decisions on values and principles, and that's what we've been trying to get the UCP MLAs and the Premier to do. And I think this is, to an extent, what the 1905 project is trying to do, but they're doing it in a way in which it seems to many people that their objective is perhaps to remove the Premier. I could be wrong in that interpretation, and if I am, then Nadine can correct me.
No, I agree, Dennis. That's if you listen to the recordings and some of the things they're saying, that's the goal. Yes, they're hiding behind the accountability and transparency thing. However, and I see there's lots of questions about 1905 in here. What's happened with 1905, if it was just trying to hold our MLAs and premiers' feet to the fire, I would say, yeah, all power to them. But the problem is there a lot in the last few years, there's been a lot of people who have felt like they have been harmed or hurt or abandoned in some way by the UCP or by the Premier or by MLAs, whether it has to do with, having legal issues that were talked about getting fixed for them and then it never happened. Well, now there's a chip on the shoulder. Or maybe it was a person who was denied as a candidate in some area. Maybe it was a person who was a candidate and then somebody else came in and took the position from them. Regardless of which one of those things it is, there's that pesky 5% of things that conservatives don't agree on. And the 1905 committee is made up of mostly people that have that 5% that has affected them personally, pissed them off, and they want heads to roll for it. And the idea that it's just about transparency and accountability, I would believe that, except for those phone calls and the messages that are coming out of there are twisting the truth, and they're framing things in such a way where it encourages people to think in a negative light about that 5% and abandon all of the good things that we're trying to do, which is very, very dangerous. We've seen this before. It threatened our province in the worst way over the last 10 years or so. And if we're not careful, if we don't figure out how we're going to kind of get over that 5% of things we don't agree on or 10% of things we don't agree on, we're going to have a really tough time getting anything done. And if you look at some of the stuff that's in the policy resolutions at this upcoming AGM, there's some really, really good things.
That's right.
And somebody who didn't have the government help them with any of the issues that the government caused me. As a matter of fact, they're fighting me in court right now. I have all the reason to have a chip on my shoulder for what they did to me.
Yes,
but
you
I'm looking past that, and I'm looking at the future, what we can accomplish with what we have right now. And the future is pretty bright if we can keep our heads on straight and focus on it.
And to change those policies so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
I was thinking, you know, if you consider when Danielle actually, as Premier, got a mandate, that was in the May election. Okay, so she's been Premier for 18 months.
About that, yeah.
Okay, 18 months, and all of us who are conservative want things to happen much faster than they're happening.
Yes.
But she's navigating a situation in which she has caucus members that are Canada First, Alberta Second, who didn't like the idea. They supported it ultimately, but they didn't like the idea of the Alberta Sovereignty Within the United Canada Act, feeling as though it simply creates division. But in fact, if you don't stand up for yourself, who's going to stand up for you? So Danielle, I think, in my opinion, has done a reasonable job in standing up for Alberta. Do I like discussions on net zero? No, I think it's ridiculous to aim for net zero when for those of you who have read the resolutions, as Chris alluded to earlier, there's that great resolution that points out that we should abandon net zero because CO2 is beneficial to the planet.
Yeah.
In every way. And so, you know, I mean, I just don't, you know, I've said, I've made this point before. Well, if not Danielle, who is going to articulate and navigate the future for Alberta? Now, as all the listeners should know, the Alberta Prosperity Project is a nonpartisan project. What we're commenting on right now sounds partisan, but what we're advocating for is policy. Mm-hmm. And we don't give a damn who the party is in power. We want them to implement the policies that we want. And it's quite remarkable that all of those policy resolutions, every one of them, speaks to conservative thinking, conservative ideology. And if we can get them passed at this year's AGM, then we need to put pressure on the government to implement them. And, you know, because that's where the rubber meets the road, is, you know, when they get them enacted. And I think if they do that, the NDP is going to dwindle down to irrelevance, you know, by the time of the next election, or maybe the election after that.
They'll still have people screaming, though, because that's what they do.
Well, yeah. The people that are screaming that you can't have a conversation with, I'm done with it. You know, I've tried to logically and reasonably explain my position on certain things to people who are on the other side of the fence for me. But when they abandon logic and reason and choose to just fly off the handle on emotion and, you know, groupthink, there's no point in engaging with them. Like, look what we have right here, right now. You know, our system isn't perfect. It's critically flawed. And that's one of the reasons why, I'll say this again, why the Alberta Prosperity Project has the only plausible and probable real solution for this province and this country is the Alberta Prosperity Project. That is the only group that has that. You know, we have to stop worrying about those people who we will never, ever be able to speak to. We got to keep our eye on the prize. We got to be focused on the goal and just go there. And people are going to throw tomatoes at us. They're going to throw eggs at us as we go. Mm-hmm. But we just can't let it distract us. You know, and I wish the Premier would stop trying to appease people who will never, ever vote for her or vote for anything conservative simply because they believe that the idea of a conservative government is bad. It doesn't matter that all of the policies or most of the policies that we're bringing forth are what they want. It's under the conservative banner, so they're going to vote against it no matter what. I mean, we could say we're going to release this thing that cures cancer and all disease and everything, and they would say, well, we're voting against that because conservatives are bad. That's how bad it is. And we got to stop that.
And then we also have Chris. Sorry, one thing, Kerry. I just got a comment on what Chris said, because you said something earlier about conservatives fighting each other, and that is so true. I mean, if you think about it, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of different policies, and if your favorite policy is one of several hundred, and you don't like the way the government's dealing with that, so do you throw out, as the gentleman said earlier, you throw out the baby with the bathwater? You throw out all of the other ones because you don't like the fact that one or two of the policies that you want implemented aren't being implemented right now. Maybe they'll be implemented later. Mm-hmm. You got to make better arguments to justify why they should be implemented.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
well, even the policies that will be
a problem within. You know, we've got to get over that. Yeah. We've got to get conservatives to come together. I'm not going to use that term united, but we got to come together for common cause.
Yeah. Well, even the policies that we'll be voting on this coming AGM will probably not be implemented anytime soon, because they're already working on the stuff that they voted on last year. Right. So we're still looking at and likewise, we're also looking at the Bill of Rights, where there's going to be a presentation on that. There's going to be discussion on the pension plan. also at the AGM. So there's all this stuff that's going to be taking place and again, the other thing that maybe people don't realize is that government has actually been out for the past few months. They were out like May 23rd, whatever day that is. They or June, I guess. But they actually don't start again until October 28th.
Yeah.
So just a few days before this AGM. So I'm anxious to see whether or not the Bill of Rights is dropped on the first day. And discussed in the legislature. That to me is a big thing. And likewise, even though I'm hosting this webinar to talk about the AGM, I'm still waiting to find out exactly how I'm going to vote on all of these, and I'm waiting to see what happens in terms of the leadership, because I'm waiting to see what happens that week that Danielle is talking on the floor. So and that would happen a few days before.
Reminds me of something my friend Neil said about waiting, being the hardest part.
Is it Neil that says it?
Speaking of waiting, I'm not there's things that the government hasn't done that they said they were going to do. Like Danielle talked about tax cuts. I want a tax cut. I would like another $750 in my pocket every year. Yeah. But you know what I want more than that? I want a strengthened Bill of Rights that actually acknowledges rights that we have that precede government, so that we can avoid the problems we had in the past.
Yeah,
I want the justice system to be, or the legal system to be overhauled in this province. I want to be spending less money on stuff and actually being more fiscally restrained than we're seeing. But I want our rights more than that. And that's what I'm looking at. So you said that you're hoping that they get that in the legislature.
The first day? Maybe first or second day.
They really better do that, because there's a lot of us, we're really hanging our hat on that.
That's right. No, I agree. So do you want to just jump into these policies now? There's a few of them we'll just kind of fly through, because I think we'll have a good idea of which direction things are going to go. And especially I'm going to start with the first one here. And this one here is basically it's about DEI. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it ensures all hiring policies within the Alberta Public Service and Alberta Crown corporations are based on merit, not on any DEI. And so, again, the rationale, if you've been following anything that we've been talking about on the APP, would be, yes, if I'm hiring a pilot, I want to know that pilot is competent and able to fly a plane, and not just I'm hiring them based on their religion or.
You actually do want that?
No, I don't. What I do want, no.
That's a conversation in itself. I'll tell you something about pilots later on here.
Okay, yeah. So for me, it's like, no, everyone is treated equal, and you're hired on your merit and not under diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's what this one's about.
Yeah, Kerry, Boeing wouldn't be in so much trouble right now if they had avoided the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy that they did.
Yeah, that's just one example.
That's just one example.
Yeah. Rob Schneider.
There would be more pilots flying, maybe, perhaps.
That is true.
The government of Canada hadn't made it so that pilots could now phone in for their medicals instead of actually going in and getting medicals like every other country in the world. Did you know that, folks? Your pilot doesn't go get an EKG right now. They just phone in and have a verbal medical, and then they get approved to fly. Scary.
Yeah, you're right. It's a conversation we had with the guys at Free to Fly, and I actually forget the other group, but yeah, and again, that's just pilots, right? There's anything dealing with DI, and especially when we're dealing with safety. You're going to hire someone out in the oil field just based on the color of their skin or anything, or gender. Get the most qualified person. So I'm totally for this one. So and likewise, I think for the most part we're probably all in agreement that all of these should pass. I think they should all pass. Is that right, Dennis? Is that what you want to say?
I think everyone that you go through, I think, speaks to conservative thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's continue on. Another one. This one do not allow unions to donate money to political parties. And again, this is we've in previous years they've talked about individuals can vote, corporations can't, and they were concerned about having a large donation by a corporation, say 50,000 or whatever, how much that could influence versus individuals now. And I think it's $4,300 a year. I could be wrong in that exact number, but it's pretty close to that. But unions, there's no real rule on unions. So no, I think unions, and especially knowing full well that our good buddy Gil McGowan donates to the NDP all the time, I think unions are not a good vehicle for making donations. Any comments?
I guarantee you, there's hundreds of people coming to this AGM sponsored by the NDP because they want to vote against that.
Oh, probably. Yeah, you're right.
Policy resolution, if this makes its way into legislation, will absolutely, I'm going to use the proper word for this, castrate the NDP.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that there are many members of unions that don't support their union position, and yet their part of their income goes to the union.
Yeah.
The union uses that for political purposes. Well, if the money that comes out of an individual's genes to go to the union stays with that individual, the individual can then decide whether to support a party or buy groceries or buy a new car or whatever.
That's right. There is a policy in here coming up that is specific to the Alberta Teachers Association, dealing with if you're a teacher in a public school or a private school or a charter school, and all that money goes to that union, despite the fact that maybe you don't agree with that union or that you want nothing to do with that union. Part of your dues go to that ATA, which is garbage. And
this is the concept of individual choice.
Yeah,
it's personal sovereignty. Okay,
yeah.
I want to make my own decisions, not have a union make the decisions for me.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, and then the next one, number 3, this is basically about being female, protect exclusively female spaces and categories such as washrooms, change rooms, shelters, dormitories, etc. for biological females who are female at conception and their young children. There's always going to be an exception to that, but the idea is that if you need men and a women's washroom, then you can probably supply a washroom that will get used very, very little, but it would satisfy that maybe it's transgender or gender neutral, etc., whatever they happen to call it. So I think that I'm in agreements with that. So again, having said all of these, like we agree with these policies, what would be the actual implementation, or how would they police this in effect? Would this become law? And then if you were you had your own pool in a municipality, and yet they still kept the women's washroom as being gender for both genders, what happens at that point? Does it just go through the legal process? And any comments?
If it was legislation, it would, yeah.
Yeah. There could be economic sanctions or whatever, as a result.
Yeah. Okay. So, but the idea is that, once these policies do become law, if they become law and they go through the legislature, of course, then if you're a swimming pool or some gym or whatever that currently has just 2 washrooms, then they would have to figure out how to make a 3rd washroom.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they want to cater to that, right? So that's parts of that too. Okay. All right. Let's skip then. Let's go to the next one. The next one here is, if you've seen the posters at a library, this is kind of the drag queen policy resolution. It's ensure that minors are protected from exposure to sexually explicit performances at events that receive public funding or are held in public venues. And again, do we have to go through the rationale? It's basically just like there are certain times and certain places where this can be done, 18 plus in bars, etc., but it doesn't have to be done in schools or in libraries, etc. So,
Yeah, we're not trying to be the morality police or anything like that in all of this, but there are, there's certain things that, young children shouldn't be exposed to.
Yeah.
It confuses them.
Yeah. So number 5 is, I'll call it the carbon tax policy. And basically it's prohibit any consumer carbon tax or carbon pricing scheme or carbon cap and trade system from being implemented in Alberta. And this resolution replaces a repeal of the provincial carbon tax. So basically we're just saying, you know what, we tried this repeal thing, it's not working, we're just going to prohibit it. And that's the end of that story. And again, the rationale is as of 2024, the tax rose 25% to $80 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent and is scheduled to increase annually, reaching $170 per ton by 2030. We're saying, you know what, if the rest of Canada wants to do that, that's great. We're not playing ball. We're going to say, no, we're not part of that game.
Kerry, there was, I don't know his name, but he's from the University of Calgary. And I saw him interviewed on CTV News the other day. And he was talking about the issue of the carbon tax doesn't really affect consumer staples, food, and that sort of thing. And I mean, if you just think about fertilizer and you think about the energy required to use farm equipment, and then the diesel or gas that is used to transport food from the farm to the table, as it were. I don't know where his thinking is, but I don't know. He must have some sort of a serious mental block.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I follow a bunch of different websites and a bunch of social media, left and right, whatever, just to get an idea of what they're talking about. And there is a meme out there, and it talks about the price of butter. And basically, the idea is if you have a cow, you get churn it, you make the butter, and then you package it, you put it into a truck, and then you drive that truck to a grocery store. How much money is that per butter going up? So if you have, and again, I'm kind of making numbers up, but let's say you have 100,000 blocks of butter in the back of a truck, then the difference in the carbon tax that you're paying on that truck per load comes down to like 0.2 cents or whatever the math is on it. And that is the rationale that they're using, that's not the carbon tax is insignificant in terms of what it is. But they don't realize, what does it take to make that butter? All the back end of a farmer, all the diesel, they're paying into that. And
the reason they don't talk about that.
No, they don't talk about that because it just, for them, it would go against the story that they're trying to portray.
There's more. Here's the bombshell to that.
Yeah.
So when the carbon tax was introduced federally, the federal government actually assured Canadians that small and medium businesses would not have to be burdened with the carbon tax, and they would get it back.
Yeah.
The federal government at this point owes businesses in Canada billions of dollars because they have never paid back a penny of the carbon tax that we've paid. Since I've had the cafe, I'm going to ballpark this. I'm guessing I've probably spent close to $100,000 on carbon tax.
Just on carbon tax.
$100,000, yes. And that's money that the federal government said I wouldn't have to shoulder. We're supposed to get it back. We haven't. The Canadian taxpayer, or the Canadian, oh my goodness.
Taxpayer Federation?
The CFIB, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, is working on that. They're trying to lobby the government to give this money back to Canadians, but they're just not doing it.
Yeah.
That's why they don't talk about it, because then we're not supposed to have those costs, but we have been shouldering the cost. Yeah. And so when you see these, this is a guess here, but when you see these calculations from economists saying, oh no, the carbon tax isn't actually causing inflation, they're looking at that and saying, oh, the businesses get this money back, but we haven't.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Justin Trudeau goes on his social media and says, "Oh, today you'll be getting a carbon tax credit. Go check your mail. Go check your bank account. Let's see if I've frozen it." No, he doesn't.
Yeah. And then we'll buy your kids lunch because we take too much money from you and you can't afford to buy your kids their own lunch.
So, all right, let's continue on. There's 35 of these. We're going to try and blast through a few of these here. This next one, I just call it like the Alberta Strong Policy. Maintain and defend its constitutionally mandated jurisdictional authority over all decisions affecting Albertans regarding provincial, national, international emergencies, treaties, or other agreements. This includes, but is not limited to, medical, financial, economic, security, natural resources, education, safety, and social issues and circumstance. This is, I call it the Alberta Strong, but maybe it's more like the Ottawa, stay the hell out of our jurisdiction.
And WF, stay out of our jurisdiction.
That's
and
right.
WHO. That's what this is specifically.
Yeah, that's right too. Yeah.
So let me just make one comment on this. I could talk at length about all of these things, but I'm just going to talk about one thing very briefly. But it's not limited to medical, right? So the Constitution provides for provincial control over healthcare.
That's right.
But it's usurped by the Canada Health Act.
That's right.
So that's how the federal government controls healthcare, which is why our healthcare system is so damn poor in terms of accessibility and cost in particular. When you're in the system, you can get pretty good service. You can get pretty good quality, but it could be better than it is. Anyhow.
Well, and that's why a lot of these policies, again, like you were banging on the money about healthcare being provincial jurisdiction. But if the federal government comes in and says, no, you know what, you're sick because of climate change, and climate and environmentalism is under the federal umbrella, then we're gonna deal with your hospitals, or we're gonna deal with your medicine.
Yeah, they'll use climate change for everything.
Exactly. That's the good umbrella that covers everything.
Oil and gas, forestry, you name it.
Yeah, that's right. Number 7 here is it's a parental bill of rights. Parental rights. Support of the bill of parental rights believes that the government of Alberta should ensure that legislation will recognize, support, and acknowledge the parent's prior right, provide legislative clarity, protect parents who are providing necessaries for their child's health, et cetera, and basically this replaces. All of these parts replaces the one statement, which was basically just support a comprehensive bill of rights. And now it's like, well, parental rights are not limited to those funded in education or healthcare. If a bill of parental rights is drafted, it is the utmost importance to ensure that parental rights are not perceived to be subject to government approval, et cetera. So again, is this another layer of, we have a bill of rights, parental rights, charter? Is that the way that this would be laid out? Or is this some other way?
Well, that's a good question. To an extent, the Alberta Bill of Rights, Freedoms, and Responsibilities will include some of this already.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I think this is a resolution that also should be supported by the members.
Yeah. And Nikki just asked, so when does informed consent come to play? Is that informed consent on parental, or just between two consenting adults? I'm not quite sure what that informed consent would be, but my guess is it has to do with the parental. And again, these are being presented as policies. If you're there and you want to make a comment on this to maybe get the language changed, or maybe you agreed 99% of it and you want it to go through but change it next year, these are options that we all can do at the AGM. They will let anybody walk up to the microphone, which is good to a certain extent, right? There's no outbursts or anything that's not tolerated, but just if you wanted to go up and say a few words about something, it's basically an open floor. So, all right, let's continue on to the next one then. Number 8 is also parental rights and education. United Conservative Party believes the government of Alberta should support parental rights in education by implementing the following: require teachers and school boards obtain opt-in information, written consent from the parents of a student to any instance when a teacher provides formal, informal, or incidental instruction or extracurricular activities on subject matter involving sexuality, sexual orientation, and gender identity. At the parent's written request, the teacher or the student shall permit the student to leave the classroom without academic penalty or other census. I remember that in my school, when I was going to school back in Manitoba, we basically had this sort of thing. There was always an opt-out, and I'm assuming that there's always been an opt-out here. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been in school.
Well, one of the things about this, if you go back to the previous question that was posed, i.e. informed consent, the person who wrote that may have been wondering whether or not the previous resolution included informed consent. This one does.
Yes. Okay.
This one does. Okay. This requires that the parents know what is going on.
That's right. Okay. So then that's exactly what you were talking about. Perfect. Okay. So again, we're going to kind of go through these quickly, or at least as quick as we can, just because a lot of these we agree with, and maybe there's just a bit of explanation that's needed. Number 9 here, this one's about funding. Required disclosure of funding sources for all groups which are lobbying or protesting to influence the government of Alberta. And again, we briefly talked about this just prior to this by shedding light on where funds are coming from lobbying and other efforts that are undertaken to influence the government. It will inform Albertans about which groups are behind the efforts and help illuminate their motives. Transparency of this kind will help build trust in government. And I agree with that one.
Yeah. No reason not to support this.
No, that's right. So number 10 is intergovernmental agreements. Basically, the short part of this is how governments talk to each other, and the fact that we have kind of had it with municipalities talking directly to the feds. There are certain things that they probably can, but for the most part, there should be a procedure. So this basically says prohibit any provincial or municipality entity under the Alberta government jurisdiction from entering, amending, extending, or renewing an intergovernmental agreement with the Government of Canada or a non-governmental organization, NGO, and other international interests unless prior approval has been obtained for the province. And exactly what we just talked about, I think, in terms of
this is a really important one, Kerry. This particular one, because if you wonder why Calgary and Edmonton have such a high percentage of NDP supporters or voters, and why the municipal governments in Edmonton and Calgary are socialist in their activities, is because they are being controlled and influenced financially by the federal government. And this is quite important. This resolution, it should be supported.
Yeah.
But you're right. If there's any NDP supporters there, they will vote against this.
Dennis, isn't this already included in the amended Municipal Governance Act? I know the Premier took a lot of heat for it.
The Rick McIver bill?
Yep.
I'm not sure, Chris. You could be right on that, but if so, this will possibly strengthen it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It may provide more language that's relevant. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's possible. Okay. Number 11 is reducing utility fees. This is and it's a shame that it has actually come into legislation in order to do this, because if you look at your utility fee, and again, I'm going to kind of make up numbers, but let's say your bill is $300 for your utilities, it's probably $50 in actual, water or electricity, and the rest is administration. It's ridiculous. So basically, this is review our gas and electricity pricing system with the goal of reducing administration fees to the actual cost to provide service and creating a sliding scale link between the transmission and distribution costs and customer usage. So I'm all for this because
at first glance I'm against it, but now I'm for it. And
Okay.
the reason I would be against it is because I'm a conservative and I say the government needs to stay out of business.
Oh, yes.
And utility is business. However, it's a public utility.
Yeah.
So it's not like, it's just a startup business that can go and say, we're going to start delivering electricity. No, there's tons of infrastructure that the government has used public money to build, to provide electricity and utilities for us. Yeah. So yeah, I think this could be a good one.
But we do have, Chris, a competitive environment still from multiple different companies. What this is directly aimed at is minimizing, as Kerry points out, the administrative costs.
I don't know that it's that competitive. I mean, really,
there's still only
I've been fighting with this for 5 years with the cafe. If you go from one to the other, and it really isn't all that much difference. Yeah. If people really wanted to lower the utility bills, the one thing that we could do in this province to drop our utility bills is we could fire up our clean coal plants again, and we could negotiate out of that balancing pool adjustment that we're all paying for in some of these costs. Like some of those costs on our bill right now, we're paying off $1.35 billion in early termination fees for our coal plants. And that was the NDP that did that. Yeah. So I think that might have been overlooked here, but if it drops the bill, I guess that's good.
Well, what I don't know is what the administrative fees are, but if they're substantive, then this is worthwhile.
Absolutely.
But I agree, and it's like a organized monopoly. There's really only like maybe 3 providers within a certain area, and it doesn't matter if you jump from one to the other; it's almost the same.
Yeah,
and if you're in a tough situation and don't have sparkly credit, you also don't get the good rates. You pay more. So the really poor people in Alberta, they pay considerably more for their energy than people who are wealthy and can afford to pay it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, number 12 is net zero. Look at that. We're into net zero already. Recognize the importance of CO2 to life and Alberta's prosperity by implementing the following measures: abandoning net zero targets, removing the designation of CO2 as a pollutant, and recognize that CO2 is a foundational nutrient for all life on Earth.
Exactly.
Do you think that one will pass?
Yeah, I think it'll pass overwhelmingly.
I agree. I don't think we even have to get into that with the viewership we have for sure. And then the next one here is a conflict of interest. Strengthen conflict of interest laws for elected officials. In too many cases, elected officials now sit on or in positions of power on NGOs that are working to change federal, provincial, and municipal policy. They're not always in the best interest. And I agree. We really do. There always seems to be, especially federally, if you look at federal government, like Trudeau's got his hand in so many things that there's always a conflict of interest. There's always a scandal going on.
So he's broken the law.
Well, he's totally, and I'm not sure why he's not arrested and in jail. But that's a whole other webinar, I'm sure. That'll be a Chris and Kerry show. But really, but it really just comes down to we do have to make the laws a little more tight on what the conflict of interest parameters are. So maybe just having this one line is not detailed enough on what that actually means, but I guess it's a good stepping point.
Well, the rationale is pretty, makes it pretty clear though.
Yeah. All right. Next one is, I guess we'll call this the sex change policy. I'm not quite sure what else to call it, but ensure that all medications, treatments, and surgeries attributable to health services for sex alteration practices are classified as an elective cosmetic procedures costed solely to the requesting patient. So I think as it is right now, there are certain prescriptions as well as treatments that can be paid for by tax dollars. And here they're basically saying, no, if it falls within this category, we're not paying for it.
I agree.
Okay, good.
I have trouble with that one.
Do you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So if I'm thinking about this, obviously I don't believe in this type of thing. I don't think that it's necessary. However, if there's somebody that's suffering from like severe gender dysphoria and this is the only treatment that they can take to make their life livable,
yeah,
who am I to interfere with the doctor-patient relationship in that case? Who am I to say that we shouldn't be helping those people? I mean, we do all sorts of things with tax dollars.
You're right. Yeah,
it's a tough one for me.
Yeah.
Chris, the problem here is that where there is a significant problem with gender dysphoria is in minors. Once you get older, you have a better concept of what it is you want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't think that, I don't think that kids under 18 should be getting hormonal therapy or
100% agree.
surgical manipulation.
Yeah.
But if you're over that age of consent, presumably you've become more mature and you recognize, yep, this is what I want. I want these changes to occur. And I'm not sure that that is the financial domain of the public.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think it's the financial domain. But I take your point. I take your point from a compassionate point of view. You might think that, but then you've got to say, well, what about the person that's got a scar on their face, or their breasts are too big or too small or something, and they can't cope in life because they can't deal with these things. And
one of those I think should be publicly funded.
Yeah, I think I know.
Nobody likes scars.
No,
Yeah.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
So I mean, cosmetic surgery of any, of most kinds, is the cost goes to the person who's requesting that therapy, that treatment, that surgery. But you can make the same argument that, their life is problematic because of a cosmetic issue. A very good example might be the older but very bright individual who wants to keep working and is looking for a new job, but looks old, but thinks young, and wants to have cosmetic surgery so that they look younger and more apt to be able to fulfill an employment position. Mm-hmm. So you could make that argument at that age as well. So I don't know. This is it's up to the listeners to decide which they want to go on this.
Yeah.
I have a feeling I know which way the vote is going to go, but there are a lot of questions for me. For instance, I don't believe that people should be treated with remdesivir either. Then should we say that that's not? It's difficult. I'm sure it's going to pass, and at face value, I agree with the intent of this policy resolution. Yeah. But it's not as easy as I thought it would be to. And
it's tough to put all that within one sentence, right? Yeah. And maybe it needs to be broken out a little bit more. I don't know, but anyways, we'll see what happens at the AGM. The next one is immigration, and basically it's about negotiate with the federal government to create an accord with Alberta that grants our province greater control over immigration. That's really what it comes down to. We all have heard. Danielle Smith initially say that she wanted to grow the province to 10 million. And then she basically backed out of that once the rationale kind of saying, well, how much is the infrastructure for that? And as much as we would be able to do jobs, I think we really need to be able to say, well, we're not going to get 5 million people here within a year and expect everything to go hunky-dory. There's got to be some limits. So that's what this policy resolution is basically about.
Yeah, and she was actually giving us a warning there. And I found with Danielle Smith, a lot of times it's what she isn't saying that you need to pay attention to. Like she said, the intention of what she was saying, at least from her clarification points, was that should we continue along this trajectory, we're going to hit there. We're going to become the freest, most prosperous province to live in. People will want to be here. We're projected to double our population by this year. Because we're projected to double our population, we need to start investing in infrastructure and prepare. So if you have a problem with people immigrating to Alberta because it's the most free and prosperous place on the planet, well, number one, we can take control of our immigration, which is in part of one of the 5 things that we need to take control of to ensure Alberta sovereignty, is in the firewall letter. If that's not good enough, and you want to control how many people are coming from Canada, you cannot do that without either a constitutional convention that restricts mobility rights or an independent Alberta as advocated for by the Alberta Prosperity Project, because, like I said before, it's the only plan that deals with all of these problems at face value.
Yeah. Right. So let me comment on this as well. I thought about this one, and I thought about, well, with respect to this federal government, can you really negotiate with this federal government? Not very well. And so if I were to reword that, I would eliminate where it says A, negotiate. I'd eliminate that entire line, and I'd start with the second line that says take control of immigration, include period. That's what I would have liked to have seen. But this is maybe as close as we're going to get at this particular AGM, and I suspect it'll probably pass.
Oh, the one good thing about negotiations is a negotiation can end with no, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So number 16 is basically to acknowledge that there are only 2 biological sexes and accordingly provide male or female as the exclusive option on all official government documents. So being government documents, whether or not it's a driver's license or something along that line. And again, the rationale is that here's a good example here. Clear and standardized categories for sex facilitate swipe identification by law enforcement officers during critical situations such as traffic stops or emergencies, right? So something where they have to actually identify you as being a male or female or that's where this comes into play. So any comments on that?
Again, a tough one, because if you go with science on this one, there are sexes that fall into neither category, and it's extremely rare, but it happens. Yeah. So there has to be an exception for those extremely rare cases.
And I think for right now, anything that I've seen anyways, you go on the Alberta Digital ID or anything like that, it basically says male, female, and other, right? It doesn't list off people that watch may know that I'm an actor and I deal with actor forms quite often. And it's amazing how many genders there are in the creative fields. And so it's not just male, female, it's like another 5 or 6.
That stuff's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, and it really, to me, it should just be other. You know, if you identify that, it's just other. But again, this is a policy resolution that is basically saying it's 2. And I'm not going to argue with that. And then will it pass? We'll see. So
Chris is correct, though. You know, if you look at it from a genetic perspective, the 3 of us are XY. Yeah. Our mates are our female mates. Yeah. Biologically, are XX. But there are other X and Y combinations that create gender ambiguity and genital ambiguity as well. But those are the rare exceptions. They're not common. They're very rare. Yeah. So the notion of the biological sexes, if you think about it from another perspective, you could add something to that. There are only 2 biological sexes that can ensure the future of humanity. Yeah, you know, something along those lines as well. And I think that's what it actually means. despite the reservation that Chris and I both have because of the issue of gender ambiguity and genital ambiguity, I think I can support this on the basis of procreation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I would too, simply because it's a policy resolution. But if anything like this made its way into legislation, I would be heavily debating and trying to make sure that no one's left behind.
And you're right. And it's tough when it's just one or two sentences long. And I think there would be some changes to that. But
yeah, I think the medical profession and the lawyers would get involved with this one. So it'll probably be supported as a resolution. But as far as legislation is concerned, if it were to come forward as legislation, I think there would, like I said, I think there'd be medical and legal input, and this would be a much longer document.
Yeah,
that section. Yeah,
that's right. So the next one is rezoning. So if anyone's followed what's happened here in Calgary, and it basically just says that the Calgary City Council passed a resolution to convert all single detached dwelling zones to a multi-residential zone despite significant opposition. And that's what this policy is. The policy says require municipalities to hold a plebiscite vote for proposed land use changes that would significantly impact the entire municipality. So, and I totally agree. Like it was 75% were against this blanket rezoning, and yet it still went through by city council.
Yeah, this should be a no-brainer.
I think so. Yeah. And let's go to the next one here. This one is on forest management and wildfires, that sort of thing. If you can remember Jasper that just happened, as well as any of the wildfires throughout the Western provinces, specifically, I guess. This one is develop a proactive forest management model to reduce wildfire risk through community forest education prioritization, further investment in equipment and manpower for firefighting, etc. So again, the issue that I would have with this is that if you look at Jasper, Jasper is a national park versus being a provincial park, right? So if you look at Lougheed or Dinosaur Park or anything that's provincial, that would fall under here. But I don't know whether or not Banff or Jasper would fall under this.
Well, in a sovereign Alberta, it would.
Yes, it would. You're right. And then we'd have to negotiate those lands.
There was talk. There was some talk before about our government actually considering pulling that back from the feds. Why?
Is that right?
Why do we give up our sovereignty so easily? Like, is comfort and convenience so attractive that we're willing to give up the ability to manage our own land?
Yeah.
Come on.
That is true.
We're way beyond that now, Chris.
Yeah.
There's not anything we can't control ourselves without the federal government.
You're right. So yeah, and based on that, like if the park is within Alberta, I say we should manage it. So the next one is actually another one we've done a couple of APP webinars on, and this is about UNDRIP. So if you know what that's all about, the protected Alberta Crown lands from unlawful seizure by international or federal organizations through neo-colonial interpretations of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Persons. So the rationale is really quick. I like this one. Efforts at ideological colonialism are set up to seize lands and resources by international organizations. They are attempting to do this by transferring Crown lands to First Nations and then revising international law to seize the land from the First Nations. Basically, they'll give it to the First Nations. The First Nations won't have the infrastructure and the know-how to actually be able to take care of the land. So then they'll say, don't worry about it. We'll come in and we'll save the day. And then they'll seize that land from the First Nations. The spirit and intent of the treaties and other agreements and initiatives shall remain intact and only be revised through negotiation. So that's what this policy is about.
This one is unfortunate.
Oh, absolutely. It's unfortunate.
It says protect Alberta Crown lands from unlawful seizure. Yeah. The problem is the type of seizure that we're facing is lawful seizure. And it's done through existing law. So if this policy resolution didn't have that word unlawful in there, and we got that into the legislature, that would hold some weight. But as it is right now, this would fall flat on its face.
You're right. Yeah. Good
Yeah,
catch.
I think the framers of this particular question were angry that there has been this seizure, and so they view it as unlawful. But Chris, you're correct, actually.
Yeah.
So somebody should probably speak to that.
Yeah. Chris will get up and talk about it.
Nobody else.
I'm gonna hold you accountable on this one. Number 20 is retention bonuses. So I didn't even know that this was a thing, but eliminate retention bonuses for bureaucrats. All severance shall be in line and minimums set forward in Alberta labor standards. Bonus structures will be based on measurable and attainable goals designed by the minister and department. So basically, there are people that basically just get bonuses, and they're working bureaucrats. And the policy says, no, you don't get a bonus just for the sake of getting a bonus. So
they should call this one the Hinshaw policy.
Maybe that's exactly what it's for. That's true too. I'm going to make a note of that. Hinshaw policy. All right. So if you're keeping track, we are over halfway. We have 35 of these, and we are in number 20. So maybe we can blast through these in about half an hour. So next one here. This is the province's equality. So basically, continue to distance itself from the federal government in as many facets as possible as a productive member of Confederation. Furthermore, any right given to another province should be the right given to Alberta. And really, it should be given to all provinces. Any policy that is implemented outside of Alberta that impedes good management to government on behalf of Albertans should be challenged at a constitutional level. So that's the policy there.
They could have written this a little different. It could say the United Conservative Party believes that the government of Alberta should pursue the agenda as outlined in the Alberta Prosperity Project.
Exactly. That was my thinking exactly, Chris. Yeah. Because under those circumstances, then Alberta has real negotiating power.
Yes.
Right. This is what we want, or we're out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Most Albertans are sovereigntists. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah, that's true. Number 22 is, and again, these things are going into policy, and I had just assumed that they were, or maybe it's like wasn't even sure that this should be a law. But this is what I'll call like skills training for grades 7 to 12, and the resolution is advocate and champion the skilled trades and professions by integrating the journey person and apprenticeship skilled trades education track within the grades 7 to 12 education system. So again, I grew up a long time ago, and we actually did. We had skills training. We did all our shops, whether wood shop, metal shop, and all that. And maybe they've just gotten away from that in schools. And they're basically saying, no, bring it back. Hands-on learning, employability, absolutely. And there's no reason why someone can't learn to work with tin and do that and still go to university if it came down to it, right? But at least trade.
You know what's nice about policy resolutions like this one? This type of thing, the minister could do this. It doesn't even have to go to the legislature. This could be implemented with the stroke of a pen.
Yeah. Pretty
quickly.
Yeah. Okay, I like that one. So yes, big check mark on that one. 23 is Alberta human rights. And resolution is hold the Alberta Human Rights Commission accountable for the decisions that they make. The rationale is under current legislation, the Alberta Human Rights Commission has the mandate of protecting the rights of Albertans on various protected grounds. While notable in concept, the reality is that the Alberta Human Rights Commission is not always protecting the protected grounds rights of protected grounds rights of Albertans. Bias, prejudice, and diversity, equity, and inclusion models have crept into the system, and certain Albertans' protected grounds like religion are not in fact being protected. So,
pretty straightforward.
I think so, right?
Yeah.
We're all human, and they need to be accountable for decisions they make.
This gets back to the point of human rights commissioners being judges.
Yes, right.
Appointed, getting sucked into the DEI mantra, and this is why they need to be held accountable.
And we brought up the judges thing a couple of times. Is there a reason why we can't just implement something through here that says judges have to be voted in?
There is a reason why.
Is there?
And it's also addressed by the Alberta Prosperity Project. Okay. Our judges are appointed federally.
Yes. All judges? Like even provincial judges, are they appointed federally?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
Justice of the Peace are appointed provincially, as far as I know, but our judges are federally appointed.
Okay. Wow. So we need to change that.
We do.
Well, certainly it's now the Court of King's Bench.
Yeah.
Those are appointed federally. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, then see, people, you learn something new every day on this show. So number 24 is what we talked earlier about the Alberta Teachers Association. So make membership in the Alberta Teachers Association optional for all teachers employed in public, separate, francophone, charter, independent schools in Alberta. Ensure comparable supports, benefits, and pension opportunities are available for those who opt out. Now, is there any reason why they're just focused on the ATA? Like, wouldn't any union, if you're a CUPE or you're IATSE or anything like that, you would think that you'd be able to do the same thing?
I agree.
Interesting, because we have a constitutional right to the freedom of association, but to enter into a job with these organizations, they say that you must associate with a specific group. So the idea of mandatory union membership is contrary to the Constitution in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Good points. But will that pass? I would think it's probably going to pass as it is. And then, there's no reason why it can't pass. And then maybe next year we say all unions or all associations or whatever we want to do. Number 25.
See, just a point of clarity there. See, not all associations are unions. You might pay a nominal fee of $100 to be involved with your engineering association or whatever.
Oh, that's true too. Yes, you're right.
But it's not a union, and that association isn't telling you how to vote or taking your money to give it to a party. You see?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that.
So, Dennis, do you know what it is about the ATA in particular that maybe spurred this policy resolution? Where's the rationale? Is there one on there?
Yeah, there is.
There are many teachers whose beliefs and opinions do not align with current political agenda on the Alberta, the ATA. The ATA has been putting policies over pedagogy and supporting many controversial progressive ideologies that do not represent the values of many teachers who are forced to pay dues in order to maintain employment in this province. Being able to opt out financially supporting the agenda of the ATA will give teachers more individual control over funding, advocacy, and professional development, and enable them to support causes and educational directives they do believe in. So that makes sense in terms of that, as opposed to, I don't agree with my CUPE or IATSE union based on fluff, right? There's an actual reason, SOGI policies, DI, anything like that. Maybe that's kind of the underlying of that. There you go. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, it's a good rationale,
I think. This next one is about government apps and online forums, etc. Maybe the Alberta Digital ID. always provide the option of non-digital forms of government issued ID that can be used whenever government issued ID is required. We don't want the government to be able to force us to use government apps from which they can then track our moments and actions in order to access services.
I think that should be movements.
Movements? Oh, yes, it should be movements. You are correct. Yeah, it says moments, but it should be movements.
Maybe they're tracking our moments too.
Yeah, well, it's stuck in the moment with you. Yeah. I'll make a note of that as well. Yeah, really, it's just that, I guess fundamentally we just don't want to be tracked, and we don't necessarily want to live in a digital world where it's
surveillance system,
currency, and
we want our privacy. We want our privacy.
Yeah,
this is nice and all, but the reality is that ship has sailed. And
probably,
as we've seen over the COVID stuff where the government was tracking people's movements using their cell phones, they already do that. And it's done. We cannot get away from it. And I think now, rather than focusing, this policy resolution is good and it should pass. But for the tracking and stuff like that and the surveillance, it's already happening. And the only way to deal with that is to start legislating protective laws for us regarding that.
Yeah.
Because if anyone thinks that they're not tracking us with these or listening or using this to mine data, they're living in a dream world.
Marilyn says, can't even get into an Oilers game without a phone app. As a matter of fact, can't even buy a beer without using your bank card.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
well, there's another issue here. There are individuals, particularly perhaps older individuals, that are not sufficiently knowledgeable using a digital format. Having an actual card would be preferable to them. But as Marilyn Rosser just pointed out, you can't even get into a hockey game and probably a lot of concerts and other things unless you know how to use an app.
Yeah, that's right. My dad will not be going to any hockey games, I don't think, because he still uses a flip phone. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even use the flip phone.
I wish I could say in this case we could just vote with our dollars, but too many people would sacrifice their sovereignty to go to a hockey game. Yeah,
that's true too. Yeah, you're right too. Next one here is Alberta Medicine and Schooling. So work with Alberta faculties of medicine to increase the number of physicians trained in Alberta, particularly in rural areas, by increasing enrollment and acceptance into Alberta medical facilities, faculties to graduate more doctors each year without compromising our high standard of graduation criteria recognized worldwide. So I think this is actually, wasn't this just talked about recently, Dennis, where they were talking about basically having a bursary or getting more doctors into rural areas?
There is, there is a, particularly for family medicine.
Yeah.
And there is a program, and I think if it hasn't been approved by Adriana Lagrange, the Minister of Health, yet, I think it soon will be, which I think will help to address this. The only thing I would add to this, but it's a little bit different, but it has to do with ensuring that people who are trained or who are accepted based on merit and not on DEI.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to maybe make one minor exception, and that is that, I think it is helpful where there are reservations and there are Indigenous trained physicians have very likely a better understanding of the requirements of healthcare in those regions.
That's true.
And so I think there could be a carve out, for, I would say Indigenous individuals who, have, sufficient capacity to well, to be accepted into medical school, I guess. I could say that, but I think, this is a balance again. It kind of reminds me of some of the other things that we've been talking about with respect to gender, for example. Well, this is another thing. This is race that I'm talking about, but it's race with a certain justification, because not everybody not every physician wants to work in a rural community that maybe has a large focus of Indigenous people from a reservation. And I don't, for me, it didn't matter who I was treating, but I was dealing out of a university hospital setting, so it didn't matter, who came. But if you're out in a community, that's a little bit different, and you've got to be willing to live in that community. And so all I'm saying is there might be Indigenous physicians that would be more willing to live in communities that have a very high percentage of an Indigenous clientele, as it were.
Well, that's a really good point there, Dennis. I think, we could. I'm not sure if we would need to change anything in there, but maybe just an
acknowledgement, just so that when the medical school is interviewing people, well, where are you from? Where would you like to practice?
Exactly?
That might be a factor in accepting individuals that are willing to work in that want to work in those areas.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay. So, this next one, number 27, is to stop election vouching, which I didn't even know that there was such a thing until like two elections ago. Yeah, I know this guy. He lives down my street. It's fine. He can just come and vote. It's fine. So eliminate the practice of vouching for the identity of another elector. The rationale is because no auditing system is in place, proving residency is impossible. Therefore, individuals have the potential of voting in several locations or reside out of province with no permanent residence in Alberta. Revoking vouching privileges help to ensure election integrity. So I have to agree with that.
Yeah, this is an important one.
Yeah, and again, the issue that they've got down in the States has to do with government issued ID, right? And so that part I can kind of vaguely understand, but I mean, if you're in the system, you're working, you're dealing with society, you'll have something, right? Whether it's a driver's license, and if you don't drive, then you may live in a house that has a utility bill, some sort of ID to prove that you live where you are within the electoral area. And when this came up, even at the last election, where it was like, we can just vouch, and there was a whole, 5 or 6 different paragraphs on rationale of vouching, and it was like, none of these make any sense. Who's voting? So
I know. This is all about election integrity.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, number 28 is about cell phones and social media in schools. Limit the use of cell phones and social media in our primary and secondary schools by implementing the following: ban of blah blah. I think that not taking place already? I think it has been done.
It's already been done.
Chris has a son in school, so he knows what's going on. There you go. So why would they bring this in as a policy then?
Well, that's a good question. Possibly because what's been implemented already might not be as well defined as this is. So that could be the reason.
Maybe it's up to the school.
Yeah, I mean, this makes sense. I mean, those 3 points that are there do make sense. What does it say about the rationale again?
It's a big long one. Basically, that policy voices our collective support by making a permanent call to action. Blah blah blah. Limiting smartphones also contributes to social and emotional well-being of students. But additionally, banning social media apps and websites, it eliminates access to the above-mentioned distractions of all school-provided IT devices, and that's true too. Like if you take out an iPad in order to work on something, then there should be.
Basically, fundamentally, it's to avoid distractions and to accelerate learning. So this is a good thing, and I think it strengthens whatever has been implemented already.
Yep.
And I'm not even sure it's implemented, maybe just discussed.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I'm sure that'll come up at the meeting for sure, saying, well, my school does this already.
yeah.
Yeah, and actually, in the orientation for Zach's school, they specifically mentioned the new legislation that bans cell
is that
phone
right?
use
Yeah.
in school.
Yeah.
It is
All right.
there.
Aaron just said it has only been banned during class time, which is another thing. I had heard that just during class. Maybe that's all it is too. So when you're on your break, you can just madly text everybody. I don't know. Next one here is on food systems. Support food security and diversified, resilient local food systems and programs under provincial jurisdiction by removing bureaucratic barriers that undermine the viability of small farms, restoring consumer freedom to purchase food without government oversight, incentivizing practices that prioritize long-term soil health and biological diversity. Does that mean we can get raw milk?
Possibly.
That's an interesting one, hey?
Yeah, that would be. Yeah. Food is one of our most basic needs. Ensuring all citizens have an unimpeded access by bolstering supply chain security through robust local food systems is paramount. I agree. So I think that that would probably pass too.
Oh, by the way, Kerry, you can get raw milk. All you have to do is buy shares in a cow.
Oh, I've heard that too. Yes. Or buy a cow. Can you not buy a cow?
Keep it in your garage.
Buy a goat.
Yeah.
Chris has a story about a goat that we're not going to tell today. All right, we're at number 30 of 35. Alberta taxes. We're finally into taxes. Implement an 8% personal income tax bracket for middle-income Albertans and restore the provincial tax rate of 10% as the highest personal income tax bracket. And I'm assuming that all the math has been done on here that Alberta can still survive on that minimum amount of tax.
Can you imagine if we were sovereign, out from under the control of the federal government, and there were no federal taxes paid?
Yeah.
And this was our maximal tax rate that we paid, but we might have a consumption tax to replace the GST. You probably need something.
A user tax.
4%. Can you imagine how this province would thrive and accelerate? The amount of money that people would have in their jeans to purchase the goods and services that they want? It'd be unbelievable.
I agree with
their kids' lunch.
Yeah, I agree with a flat tax. It makes math simple. If it's 10% or whatever it ends up being. And then I do believe in user tax. And I do believe that for the most part, like if there's a gasoline tax, that's supposed to be going towards roads. Well, what do you do if you've got an electric car? How does that money come to do the road? Well, I don't know. I'd hate to say that maybe we need another bureaucratic system that checks your odometer in order to know how many miles you've traveled. I don't know. I don't even know how you would end up doing it. But
it's important to be done though, Kerry, because the weight of electric vehicles is much heavier.
5 times. Absolutely, it is. Yeah, it breaks down.
Well, just track them with their cell phones.
I was just gonna. That's why I brought up my cell phone.
Well, you could have a GPS that's connected to some sort of monitoring accounting system, and that roughly would equate to the tax you pay on gas to the amount of road surface that you drive on. And both costs go to road maintenance and road expansion.
Or we could just have a heavy levy registration time on all electric vehicles, because not only are they unnecessary and undermine our energy security, but they're also bad for the environment. But with the taxes part here, this is better than what we have now. So I would say yes. However, it is my firm belief that no man or woman should be compelled to give a portion of the fruits of their labor to anyone for any reason. So Dennis, you're right. We should not have any income tax. The only tax we should ever pay that's an ethical tax is a consumption tax, because then
I would agree with that.
Your kids' groceries, you don't
Yeah.
pay tax on that. If you're paying your utility bills, you don't pay tax on that. If you go out and you buy a Lamborghini or a, whatever, some super luxury item, yes, you should pay a very heavy tax on that because obviously you're able to support that.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, a flat tax would be better than what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many comments like, why pay taxes if it's all going to other countries? Yes. Yeah.
Bingo. Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Alan.
That's
Yes,
a really good point.
It's important to subsidize the laundry that's happening in other countries.
Yeah. Number 31 is Albertans all Albertans are treated equally, such as through no DEI. Strengthen the rights of all Albertans to be treated equally is basically what it is. It's a really short policy, but the rationale is in too many cases involving institutions, organizations, businesses, and even with governments, the merits of an individual are either ignored or not taken into account in favor of the model of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The very concept of DEI is racist in nature and as much must be eliminated in Alberta. So I think we've kind of talked this one in previous policies as well. So I'm not quite sure why this is its own policy. And what did they not put in as policy instead of?
See, when you think about it, I always have a struggle with that term equality, because what is it really? What are you really aiming for? For me, it's always equality of opportunity as opposed to equality of outcome.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And but then equality of opportunity, you've got to look at things differently. Kerry, you and I wouldn't have an opportunity to play in the NBA.
That is very true. Absolutely true.
For obvious reasons, because we're not equal in terms of being 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know, we're all different and we all have opportunities in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
But equality of opportunity. Any case, I understand, you know, what the folks who drafted this are after.
Yeah.
And it probably should be supported.
Yeah.
But I think it just, people have to bear in mind what we mean by equality.
Yeah.
Being treated equally is fine. You know, for example, let's go back to the NBA. So Kerry, you and I are applying for a job in the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have an opportunity to talk to the manager, and the manager says, well, come back when you've grown another 4 feet and we'll consider it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so we've been treated equally. We were given an opportunity to talk to them, but you know, we didn't get on the team, right? So
yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Okay, we'll go on to the next one here. This one is about freedom of speech and assembly, and I believe this one. Oh yeah, it's just it's a strike through. It's something that was in there already. Require publicly funded post-secondary institutions to implement a policy guaranteeing the freedom of speech and freedom of assembly of all students and staff that does not interfere with the functions of teaching, learning, or access to the institution proper. So what they did on this one is they basically just ended up adding this on, that does not interfere with the functions of teaching, learning, or access to the institution. That was the change that they implemented into this one.
See, that concerns me a little bit. I've supported this one. I said in the beginning I support them all, but I'm rethinking it. Yeah. Because let's say, for example, we wanted to have Tucker Carlson speak at the University of Calgary or the University of Alberta. There could be those people that say, by virtue of Tucker Carlson coming to speak at our university, that's interfering with some individuals' sense of comfort to learn in that environment, be at that institution. It concerns me a little bit. I know the intent of this, and it probably should be supported, but when you say doesn't interfere with the functions of teaching, learning, or access to the institution proper, there are those people that might oppose Tucker Carlson speaking because their view is that it's interfering with their learning experience.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And that's the rationale, is it's does not give the right to disrupt other students' access to learning. Maybe they were thinking more in terms of protests as well, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it should be supported personally.
Yeah. Okay. Number 33 is Alberta landowners. Strengthen landowner rights. Just that simple. Landowners in Alberta are subject to many conditions in which they suffer losses of usage and or access to their own land because of various federal, provincial, and municipal regulations. Landowners need to have more say when it comes to their property, as it is, in fact, their property. Which again drives me nuts that I need to go and ask permission to build a shed on my property.
Kerry, that's because it's not your property. You have custodianship of that property, but you don't own it. It's not yours.
Yeah.
You're free to use it and sell it, buy it, whatever, but it's not yours. That's the way all of our property is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this specifically refers to, well, it says property rights, but then it says strengthening landowner rights. Property also includes firearms. If you own firearms, that's your property, and nobody has the right to confiscate those firearms or your vehicle or your house, etc.
Right. And that's the argument about the Bill of Rights, is that we're talking about property, we're talking about guns, only because the way that they could change the law would be this big swoop that it's not just guns. It could be your car, it could be your house, it could be your lawnmower, it could be anything.
Exactly.
Your beer.
Exactly.
Could be beer. Yeah, could
beer. Yeah. Well, heaven forbid.
I'll fight them over that one. Okay.
Yeah.
We got two more left. This one is the recall. This is about a recall. Of course, we know what happened in Calgary. They tried to get rid of the mayor, and the amount of signatures needed were, whatever it was, 50% of the electoral amount, whatever it was. They've said, what it should be instead is implement a recall trigger requiring 50+1 of the total number of votes most recently cast for the targeted office, applicable both to provincial and municipal elected officials, and to provide a time frame of 120 days. So if in our case, and again, I'm kind of making these numbers up, but let's say out of Calgary, we had 800,000 eligible voters. We needed 400,000 plus, 1% in order to get rid of Gondek. But if only 130,000 voted in the previous election, then really you would only need 65,000 plus 1% in order to oust him, right? To me, that is a no-brainer. That's exactly what it should be.
This is what it should have been in the first place. That recall legislation that Kenny introduced, it was smoke and mirrors, just like the referendum on equalization. It was to appease the voters and say they did it, but they didn't actually do it. So this remedies that. Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement on this one. And the last one is on water. And I'm in Calgary, and I've mentioned this a few times. This is basically just about the debacle of infrastructure, etc. So the policy resolution is fund and construct additional new reservoirs for water storage and work with industry to reinvest in existing privately developed water infrastructure to ensure a dependable supply of water for the growing population, agriculture, industry, and communities, and reduction of flood risk for Albertans. So to me, this again is a no-brainer. Does it actually have to be a policy per se? Some of these I question whether or not this is just good governance, good management, or whether or not they should actually be as a UCP policy.
Well, that's a good point that you just made, Kerry. But sometimes a government needs a kick in the butt, and this is kind of a kick in the butt to get it on their radar to actually do something more than just a Band-Aid solution.
No, I agree.
This is an interesting policy resolution, but I wish they had. There's another glaring problem with our water management and usage in this province. Back in the 50s and 60s, and actually right up into the 90s, places like Mirror, Alberta, we had our own wells. Every house here had a well. Our municipal supply was from a well that's just east of town. It was world-class water, multi-million-dollar water treatment plant. We were sovereign in our water production because we got it from the ground. Now what the province has done is they have stripped the ability of municipalities to access groundwater, and they've said, no, you have to use this water. So
That's true.
all of a sudden, we're using all of the surface water in the province. We have way more people. We're wondering why we're missing surface water as we use it, and it's expelled and goes into groundwater. We're not recovering any of it.
Yeah.
So there's another problem with our water in this province, and it's nice to see people talking about it though.
Water is regulated like up the yin yang. You would not believe the amount of forms and stuff you have to deal with if you move one drop of water from one area to a next. They need to keep track, in quotation marks, of where all that water is. And you know, I totally agree with this sort of a situation to say that we need to have additional reservoirs in case there's a break somewhere, and we need to be able to get water out to our population, to livestock, to agriculture, etc. How they will actually go ahead and implement this stuff, I don't know. This could end up being yet another layer of bureaucracy saying, well, we need to create this other reservoir, we need to do this, but at the same time, who's going to fund that? Who's going to be in charge to be able to do that? So I don't know. Like, and again, any one of these policies you can probably pick apart based on your own observations. But for me, that would be the only thing I would say, is that if we're going to be doing that, then who in the end is going to be responsible for that?
Yeah.
So there you go. There's all 35 amazing policies. If you're still watching, and we really have not had many people drop off. So thank you so much for watching this entire riveting 2 hours on governmental policy. But you know what? This is good. And I'm glad we went through this, so that please share this webinar out there to anybody that's going. And likewise, even if you are going or you're not, you're considering going, I just closed that window. Again, it is November 1st and 2nd. The UCP AGM is happening in Red Deer at Westerner Park. The really cheap tickets were gone right at the beginning of June. And now if you're going to be planning on going and you don't have a ticket, the full member is $399. The problem with that being now is $399 is it's $399 whether you buy the ticket today or you buy it, I think, even at the door. So we really won't know what number is going to be showing up at the door there until we're actually there. Right now, I think it's 5,700 people, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that's right, Kerry. How many people were last year? Wasn't it around 4,200 or something last year?
I think it was over 4,000 anyways.
Yeah, I think so.
It was 3,800, but now I can't.
That's possible too. Somewhere in that. I don't know.
It was some number.
A couple of hundred people here and there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're over 6,000 now.
No, we're not. I remember reading an email or something posted today that no, we're not at 6,000 yet. But I think it's 5,700. I think they're forecasting 6,000. So we'll see.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wendy just said 3,800 from last year. So there you go.
3,800. Yeah.
So
it's too bad that that they increased the price that much.
But again, we understand the logistics of why you need to do that, right? If you do this and you have 1,000 people buy in at $120, you're going to basically look for a venue that holds maybe 1,500, right? And so if we kept it at $120 all the way through, geez, we could fill Canada Place or something ridiculous with the number of people that would want to go.
And the closer you get to the date, the more expensive it is to add more people.
And that's true. Yeah,
that's probably true as well. Yeah.
There's the food and tables and all that logistics too. So
that's a good point, Chris.
Yeah. So with that, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on tonight and going through these. I know it's 2 hours you're never going to get back. But I appreciate you guys for coming on, and I know our viewers do too. So thank you so much for taking the time out and being able to do that. And any further words you guys want to say?
Of course.
Of course. You'll go last. Dennis?
Well, I just want to emphasize, even though we're talking about the UCP AGM and these resolutions, what we're trying to do as a nonpartisan organization is influence what the provincial government does.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want the listener to think that we're necessarily partisan. Right now, there's no other party that can influence the future for Albertans other than the UCP, and we're certainly not going to the NDP. So unless all of the independence parties come together, which I think is not going to happen from experience that Chris and I and Kerry, well about, this is our best shot to try and work with the government based on implementing policies that, as Chris pointed out earlier, that we've been advocating for the last few years.
Yeah.
And so to me, I have a degree of satisfaction that the UCP Board of Directors and the policies that have been accepted for presentation and voting at the AGM are, for the most part, many things that we've been advocating for a long time. And so this is making change, but not necessarily being partisan about it.
No, that's amazing. That's exactly what it is. And likewise, I do want to emphasize that even if the NDP were in power, we'd still be at the table having conversations with them. I just don't think that they would be listening to anything we say.
Yeah, they'd have cognitive dissonance big time. Yeah.
Mr. Scott, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I appreciate you, Kerry, and you, Dennis. Dennis, you're supposed to be retired, drinking wine on a beach or doing something else with your time, and you choose to spend way more than 2 hours a week. There you go.
Lana left this for me, but I hadn't had any.
I have Canada Dry. Does that count? No.
Yeah, that counts. But my point is, you could be doing 1,000 other things, and I appreciate the time that you spend doing this. I realize that it's way more than the 2 hours people see on these webinars. And Kerry, Kerry has kept the torch. No, we can't say torch lit because I think that's racist.
I don't even know.
Kerry's kept the machine going throughout the kind of slow down and the little bit of slump. He does all the work for, not all the work. There's a team that does the work.
There's a team.
Kerry does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the webinars, the preparing for them, those types of things. You guys see 2 hours of a webinar. Kerry's been working on this for hours and probably for the whole last week. And again, Kerry has other things to do that would be probably more fun for him, but he chooses to do this out of service for us Albertans and Canadians. Yeah. So I just want to let you guys know that I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm assuming that the viewers do as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and kudos to you again for everything you've done, and I'm sure we'll be having another conversation about Chris's class action suit with
yes, that's fun,
against the government, and of what's going on with that, and Rebecca Ingram being on that same class action, and then. That's one side. That's the businesses, and then there's another side dealing with the vaccine injuries and that sort of stuff. That is also in court. That actually started today. Again, certification process, blah blah blah. We're definitely going to be doing webinars on that to educate people on. So if government does something wrong, how do we hold them accountable? Well, this is definitely one way that we can do that. And the whole point of doing these webinars is to educate our viewers, and I really enjoy doing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it, and I really enjoy being able to educate everybody and giving them a little bit of knowledge. A little bit of knowledge can go a long way, especially when you have discussions. And I look back on a few of the conversations I've had with people that say, I got into doing policy, or I got into my CA because of what APP was doing and what Chris and Kerry were doing, and so that's great. I like hearing those stories, so that's good. Yeah. And with that, thank you very much, gentlemen, and we will see you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
you're quite
both
welcome.
and you, Chris. All right. Take
All
care,
right.
guys.
All right,
And
cheers.
thanks to all the viewers.
Good night, everybody.
Good.